Hi, and we're going to talk about Chapter 1, something you're going to cover in the first week here. Um, what, One of the things I do is try to do some what I would call micro lectures. None of these will last very long, and I'm going to try to hit on the highlights. It doesn't mean that's all that you need to be concerned with in the chapter or in the material that's being covered, but I want to hit on the highlights of it, and we'll go from there. So, the learning objectives in Chapter 1 are to define the nature of U.S. business, describe the external environments of business, and discuss how these environments affect the success or failure of organizations, describe the different types of global economic systems that are out there according to the means by which they control the factors of production. This is pure economics, so if you ever take a class in economics, you'll learn about this in much more detail. We're going to show how markets, demand, and supply and affect resource distribution in the United States or in any capitalist society, identify the elements of private enterprise, and explain the various degrees of competition in the U.S. economic system. And again, this is all pure economics. Explain the importance of the economic environment of business and identify the factors used to evaluate the performance of an economic system. Learn about the skills you will gain through this text. Okay, so the first one is, let's talk about business. The concept of business. Businesses are organizations that provide goods and services in our type of society to earn profits. Profits are the difference between a company's revenues and its expenses. So I have a question. Is there ever too much profit? It's a slightly dated thing. It's from 2019, but it shows the profits of some of the largest corporations in the world. The very first one is Saudi Aramco, which is a consortium, if you will, of Arabian countries' oil production. And it shows how much profit they make per day, which is just amazing when you look at that. It's just huge, okay? And back then Apple was number 2, and as you go down the list, so you may know some of these companies, you may not know some of them, but they make an enormous amount of profit every day. The top 50 most profitable companies in the United States, and this goes back to 2020, Berkshire Hathaway, which if you don't know who that is, that's Warren Buffett's holdings company. And you can see several others. You see Microsoft, you see Apple, these are huge amounts of profit that they make per year. So, that's a lot of money, right? Is it ever too much profit? In 1975, the number of firms generating 50% of the earnings from the economy was 109. There was 4,819 total public companies. The portion of that profit was 2.2%. In 2015, and this has actually gotten worse, if that makes sense, or more severe, I should say. In 2015, the number of firms generating 50% of the earnings dropped to 30. And there was 3,766 total public companies in the U.S. That's less than 1% of the company are making 50% of the earnings. That is what's been going on in our economy. This was just a statement I show to people because CEOs have been making a disproportionately higher and higher and higher amount of the total pay of companies compared to, all the employees. So there's a disparity thing going on here that is probably not that great. So is profit fair? And you might look at those things and say, like, well, no, that's ridiculous. We should never let that happen. It's like, but on the other hand, profits are the rewards for taking financial and time risks. That's really what it comes down to. And it's not that unreasonable to expect that these people are there to make a profit, okay? And you might say, like, well, why are businesses really beneficial? Well, guess what? They employ a whole lot of people. And if you look at these, you can see what the percentages are by the different categories. And it's pretty substantial. So they pay a lot of salaries and wages out there, okay? So You're also going to learn about economic systems, which there's a few. There's planned economies. The big ones are planned economies, socialist economies, and capitalist economies. So I'm going to give you a real brief overview because I kind of want to, if you're interested in learning more about it, these are things you might want to read about. A planned economy is an economy that relies on a centralized government to control all or most of the factor's production and make all or most of the production and allocation decisions. So that would be communism, and to a certain degree socialism. If you want to learn more about that, read a really interesting piece of literature called The Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. It is pretty interesting. I've read it several times, and it's interesting to see the theory behind those types of economies. Okay, and a market economy is where individual producers and consumers control production and allocation by creating combinations of supply and demand. That would be what the underpinnings of what we call a capitalist economy. There's two really important things to read if you want to learn more about it. Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman, which is a really great book. Milton Friedman was a Nobel Prize-winning economist that was at the University of Chicago. Very interesting guy. And but the underpinnings of all that was something written by a guy named Adam Smith. It's called The Wealth of Nations, and again, it's based on economics. That is a tough read. I was going to say, if you want to read it, more power to you, but it's not an easy thing to read. I'm going to just say that. It's very long, okay? And written in the English of the time, okay? So, what typically we see today is there's mixed market economies. In other words, it's not all one or the other. The People's Republic of China is moving towards a mixed market economy. You know, on paper, it's a planned or a communist economy, but in reality, there's a lot of capitalist types of influences there. I've done a lot of business with companies in China, and yeah, they act very much like capitalists, so it's not that out of the ordinary. Okay, and privatization happens as a process of converting government enterprises into privately owned ones. There's sort of a push and pull on that. It's not all one way or another. So most economic systems today are mixed market economies. Just a real quick overview of demand and supply. Again, pure economics. The thing you're interested in is equilibrium, that's where the demand curve and the supply curve intersect on this supply and price view. And that's generally considered to be the profit maximizing quantity to be sold or whatever. Okay, so the interesting thing here is that this is how free market economies work, in theory. What's interesting is we are in a period of high inflation. I think we all see that. What should happen in a period of high inflation is that demand goes down as the price goes up. That's not been happening, and for that reason, inflation's not yet in check. Anyway, that's a very important thing to consider. I'm going to give you a brief overview of this because sometimes it's confusing to students. The degrees of competition in a capitalist society. There's perfect competition, and where they talk about a local farmer, and everybody's basically selling the same thing. So the price that's established for it and the ability to influence the price that it's being sold at is minimal on the part of the supplier. And what you see here is what's going up with each one of these steps is the ability of the suppliers to dictate the price, okay? And the concept of price elasticity comes into play, and it starts to make sense when you look at it that way. So these are specific examples of it, but in a perfect monopoly, there's no real competitors. It's usually regulated by the government, no directly competing goods or services, and the level of control over price by individual firms is huge, So it's kind of interesting because there's a lot of legal wrangling going around a company called Comcast, who owns most cable services, And they make the argument that they don't have that much control because there's lots of competition to them, streaming services, what have you, that kind of thing. There's a lot of people who disagree with that. So it's kind of an interesting thing to see how that'll shake out. There's measures of economic systems. Stability is an important part of looking at it. Inflation, as we've been experienced lately, has been very, very high. That's sometimes measured by the Consumer's Price Index. So there's a lot of things going on that are a little bit unsettling in our economy. Unemployment has been actually fairly low, and then I want to make a point of saying, because you'll hear people banty these terms about, and quite without really thinking about what they mean. A recession is a period during which an aggregate output, as measured by GDP, declines. A depression is a prolonged and deep recession over periods of time. So we've seen a lot of those types of things going on in our economy over the last, say, like 20 years. Stability is what we're ultimately trying to get to. That concludes my presentation for Chapter 1. There's a lot more attached to it, so you definitely want to read the whole chapter and really understand what's going on there. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me. Take care.